Utah hires Kyle Whittingham on a 5-year deal, and it's got me thinking about Tiger Woods in 2009.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another reaction episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all so much for helping make that the case, and especially my everydayers. Shout out to all of you. This is all Kyle Whittingham, Michigan. The Jason Beck wars are about to intensify. Get ready. I have so many thoughts. This episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. So, Michigan gets it done. These reports circulated Friday morning that they were closing in on Kyle Whittingham. It was supposed to get done by the afternoon, and then it did. And Kyle Whittingham on a 5-year deal. I don't know if he'll coach all of that at Michigan. I think it's more likely he coaches less of it than past it. But I could see him being there for 4 or 5 years. Michigan hits a home run. And here's what it got me thinking about. This is a great hire for Michigan across the board. Culturally, I think he's a good fit. He's a guy who you know is going to come in and be no nonsense, which is something that they need right now. But that you've wound up in this position in Ann Arbor is pretty incredible. And it got me thinking about one of the all-time underrated Tiger Woods moments that golf fans like myself remember. In 2009, Tiger Woods was playing at the BMW Championship. And on par 5 of over 600 yards, that's a pretty tough hole, even for the pros. Questionable as to whether you can get there. And Tiger certainly's got enough stick to get there, but you need 2 good shots. And it's not the easiest hole in the world. At least that's not the way it looked on TV. Tiger made on that hole on Sunday, wearing his iconic black, red, black. It was dubbed by one of the broadcasters as an all-universe birdie. Michigan just made an all-universe birdie. Now, what that entailed for Tiger was off the tee. He hit a ball so far right, it almost went left. It was like cars, turn right to go left. He hit it all the way to the right. And then he hit a miraculous punch shot that he made look way too easy. Kept it under the trees, had some real juice in the fairway. Oh, too much? Oh, look, it went through the fairway. And he was behind a tree. And he's in the 120-ish range out. The flag is up, so he doesn't have a lot of room to get it close when you're going to be hitting a ball, again, under tree branches and around the tree trunk. And he hooks a ball up the fairway, runs up the throat of the green, nestles to about 12, 15 feet, drains the putt for birdie. Michigan has done just this in their coaching search. Everything up until this point was ugly, awful, bad, not good. In no way, shape, or form is this how anybody in Ann Arbor could have possibly drawn this up. No one wanted to be at the point where Kenny Dillingham is saying, I'm good, and signs an extension with Arizona State. And Kalen DeBoer beats Oklahoma on the road after trailing 17-0. That wasn't their goal. And still, somehow, no photos on a scorecard, folks. Somehow, they wind up with Kyle Whittingham. Imagine thinking about this hire through this lens. If Utah had not named Morgan Scalley their head coach in waiting, and I have more thoughts on that coming later in the show. If Kyle Whittingham had not already been leaving the University of Utah football program, if he was locked in to stay, just had a bounce back year after a 5-7 campaign, his first time under 500 in over a decade, I believe. What if he was getting ready to coach the Vegas Bowl, which Utah is going to win because they're a much better team than Nebraska? What if he was getting ready to do that to cap off an 11-win season, showing that he's still got it, just a couple years removed from back-to-back conference championships. What if Michigan had pulled Kyle Whittingham away then? The reaction to this hire, I think, would be even stronger. It would have been, oh my goodness, look at what Michigan just did. How in the world did they pull this off? How did they pull the face, voice, and heartbeat of Utah football away from Salt Lake City? How did they do it? How? Well, in this instance, they kind of lucked into it. But luck of the draw has gone Michigan's way. Because Kyle Whittingham, and I think you can apply this to the Penn State coaching search as well, they just went down avenue after avenue and came back empty time and again on various coaching candidates. Kurt Cignetti, nope, locked down. Matt Rule, extended. Would Rhett Lashley be, oh, no, Rhett Lashley extended. Oh, no. What about, oh, no, not him either. And it was a horrible look. And then all of a sudden you look up and Matt Campbell's hired and you go, wait a minute. If you put together a list of 10 names at the start of the Penn State coaching search to replace James Franklin, wouldn't Matt Campbell have been on the list? Yeah, he would have. He wouldn't have been option number 1, but he's not option 20. He's not option 12. He's a lot closer to option 5 than he is option 10. For the Michigan football job, at a time where you need a cultural reset, given recent events in Ann Arbor, Kyle Whittingham is among the best, most qualified coaches in the country to take over that situation. Because you have to have a coach after the last several years that is going to, yes, of course, win games. That's priority number 1 above all else. You also need someone that is going to bring no nonsense and no drama and make it feel like the quote-unquote Michigan man sort of program that plenty of folks around the school preach. Kyle Whittingham's that guy. I mean, 2 decades in Salt Lake City. What's the worst thing you can say about Kyle Whittingham? He got mad after losing a rivalry game and threw a chair. I think that's the worst thing you could say. He doesn't give a lot of updates on injury reports. Get ready for that, Michigan fans, if you weren't used to it already. The sorts of high-class problems that Kyle Whittingham brings to a fan base as a head coach are exactly the sort of problems that Michigan should have. So they wind up with the best hire kind of by accident. But you know what? It's an all-universe birdie. You sprayed it all the way into the trees. You didn't get it into the fairway. And all of a sudden you look up and you made 4 and par in the hole was a 5. Am I surprised? No, because this kind of was winding down to be the only option unless you were going to snag Eli Drinkwitz from Missouri, who just hired Michigan's offensive coordinator, unless you were going to get Clark Lee to leave his alma mater at Vanderbilt and what they have built there. I mean, it's a good day to be a Michigan Wolverines fan. It really is. Because Kyle Whittingham has for a long time played the sort of football that we know works at Michigan and the Michigan fans are going to adhere to, that they'll get behind. They'll support. They'll say, yeah, that's Michigan football. There won't be a crisis of identity like what Luke Fickell has battled with Wisconsin over the last couple of years. That's not happening in Michigan. Because when you watch Michigan the last several years and you watch Utah the last several years, a lot of similarities between those two. Now, the question will, of course, be, who's his offensive coordinator going to be? First, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. And if you want to bet the college football playoff, or if you want to make bowl season exciting, if you're one of these lame people out there dogging on bowl season's terrible, bowl season's not fun. Well, you want it to be fun and exciting? Guess what? perhaps the best way to do that for you is to go check out FanDuel. They've got every bowl game. They've got every playoff game. Anytime I hand out a pick on my show, just fade it. Just fade it. Just a horrible year for the best bets. I am determined to be better next year, but I can't blame the lines provided by FanDuel because, of course, they're getting it right all the time. So, if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Thanks to Christopher Nolan, you've probably heard of the Battle of Dunkirk. Perhaps you know of the Battle of Midway, Gettysburg, Antietam. Famous battles in history. This one could be up there. Jason Beck, the offensive coordinator for the Utah Utes this past season, a fast riser as he was at New Mexico that darn near beat Minnesota in overtime. Great bowl game that I was watching earlier today. New Mexico, whose head coach himself, Jason Beck, will not be at New Mexico for very long. He was there. Jason Beck was. Yeah, don't forget that name swap. Jason Eck got hired to New Mexico when Jason Beck got hired to be the OC at Utah. That's some college football stuff right there. Anyway, Jason Beck led Utah to scoring over 40 points per game this year. And he was in New Mexico, and now, according to reports, Kyle Whittingham wants to bring him to be his offensive coordinator at Michigan. Well, that makes plenty of sense, of course. Now, here's the question. Did Utah screw this up so badly that Jason Beck feels more of an allegiance to Kyle Whittingham? Or does he want to stay in Salt Lake City with Morgan Scalley? Morgan Scalley has been the defensive coordinator at Utah for quite a while. He is now the head coach of the University of Utah. He'll coach his first game now in the Las Vegas Bowl. It was going to be Kyle Whittingham's last game, and now it's not. So what I've been told is that initially Kyle Whittingham was indeed at peace with the move, but then things started to sour a little. I don't think it's gotten to the point where Kyle Whittingham can't stand Utah, hates the Utes, wants to screw them in every way. Don't think that's the case. I do think there is at least some reduced level of goodwill between the two sides because of how all this was handled. And the whole idea of naming a head coach in waiting publicly sounds good and gives fans a sense of knowledge and continuity. But in reality, there's no upside to doing so in a public setting because Utah felt pressured to move on from Kyle Whittingham, even though he just had a great year. They want him to ride off into the sunset. They want things to feel good. They don't want it to end with a 5-7 campaign. All right, everybody understands that. But here's the problem. Morgan Scalley has been patiently waiting his turn. So Utah made a promise to him. And Kyle Whittingham was a part of that promise in naming his head coach in waiting. So what you have now is Kyle Whittingham has the bounce back season he was looking for, but they didn't achieve everything they were capable of. They win at BYU. Utah might be in the college football playoff. They certainly would be in the Big 12 championship game. So all of a sudden, I think what Utah did here is they reignited the passion for Kyle Whittingham. He went from retiring to, I'm in the transfer portal, man. Now he's the head coach at Michigan, and it's a great fit. But all of a sudden, Utah was faced with a decision as an administration and a university. Do we make Morgan Scalley wait for a third year? He was supposed to be the head coach this season, but 2024 didn't go according to plan. Do you make him wait again when you've decided he's the future of the program and risk losing him? Or do you show allegiance to the guy who suddenly shows a revitalized sense of urgency to coach and is still clearly capable of doing it at a high level, who's also been the face of your program for the last 20 plus years? What do? Do you honor the past or do you think more about the future? Because Kyle Whittingham signs a 5-year contract. I believe Matt Campbell signed an 8-year contract at Penn State. So Kyle Whittingham knows I'm 66 years old. I'm not coaching forever, but he's still clearly got plenty left in the tank. And there is a school of thought out there that you should keep Kyle Whittingham at all costs, and you should do whatever it takes to make him happy, even if that means scorning your defensive coordinator and potential future head coach. That's one school of thought. On the other side, it's, hey, we have to do what's in the best long-term interest of the program, and we don't think Whittingham would be here more than 3 seasons, whereas we envision Morgan Scalley being the next Utah head coach for the next 10 seasons. That's a tough decision to make. But because all this was done publicly, I think it got a little bit messier. I think if you'd just done this behind the scenes, you might have just quietly lost Morgan Scalley to the coaching carousel, and that wouldn't have been a problem. But now you're in this spot. So the Jason Beck wars are underway as I'm recording this show. And by the time you're listening to or watching it, perhaps there's resolution, perhaps there isn't. But Jason Beck doesn't actually have a strong tie to Utah. He came from New Mexico. He's been there for 1 year. Kyle Whittingham's the guy who hired him. But then here's where it gets really interesting. Does he want to stay with the guy who he went with from the Lobos, that being quarterback Devin Dampier, and have that familiarity with a team that certainly is going to expect to compete for a Big 12 championship again, as they did this season? I know they weren't in the game, but they were in the hunt, roaming around for the college football playoff. Or would he want to go to Michigan, where he'd probably get a little bit more money, where he might have more resources, where the brand is much bigger, and where your quarterback is not someone you know, but it's someone who's more talented than Bryce Underwood? What do you do if you're Jason Beck? I don't know. This is now going to come down, I think, to where Jason Beck wants to go. Because that's who Kyle Whittingham reportedly wants to hire. Of course it's who he wants to hire. Then you flip over to the defensive side of the ball. Report from Matt Zenitz at CBS Sports that Kyle Whittingham wants to hire, wait for it, Jay Hill. A state of Utah football name, and as someone who calls games in the state of Utah, I've known Jay Hill's name for quite a while. I've talked to Jay Hill before. He's a heck of a football coach. BYU's defense was in the top 25 this past year, when the composite rankings would tell you they shouldn't have been there. Why? Because he's incredibly good at the X's and O's thing. Well, what happens if you mix the Jimmies and Joes at Michigan and the recruiting potential there with the X's and O's of Jay Hill? I think you have something really good. Kyle Whittingham has coached against Jay Hill, of course, over the last couple of seasons as he served as BYU's defensive coordinator, but they have had a relationship for a long time because he was at Weber State in the state of Utah. Yes, the alma mater of one Damian Lillard, now of the Portland Trail Blazers again. That's where he came from before he was BYU's defensive coordinator. So Kyle Whittingham saying, I know you, and I know you, and I know you're both good. If I don't think anything's a guarantee in this world, especially what BYU is doing in their commitment to athletics across the board, they're going to try and keep Jay Hill around. They know how good he is there in Provo. If he is able to pull both Jason Beck and Jay Hill, I think you would be looking at worst a top 5 staff in the Big Ten. I mean, you'd have a more proven staff, actually, than what Oregon will have going into next year. Chris Hampton's been a defensive coordinator, but never at that level of college football, because Tosh Lupoy's now Cal's head coach. Will Stein's going to be Kentucky's head coach. Drew Maringer hasn't been a full-time offense coordinator in a decade by the time he takes the reins for the 2026 season. So on paper, I think you'd say Ryan Day just lost Brian Hartline, of course. Kurt Cignetti in Indiana would probably be number 1, quite frankly. Ryan Day and Matt Patricia, that combo probably gets you enough to be number 2. I mean, Lanning is, of course, a great head coach at Oregon, but the quality of his coordinator, we don't really know at this point in time. There's an unknown element to that. I've watched Jason Beck, and I watched Jay Hill. I'm just saying, At worst, that would be the 5th best staff in the Big Ten. It'd probably be number 3 or number 4. So, I think this will work. I think it'll work right away. The question becomes, what do they do at quarterback? First, this episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. There's nothing like college football. We all know that. Tailgates, packed stadiums, being right there in the middle of it all, the energy, the bands, the moments you remember forever. But actually getting tickets, that part used to be frustrating. With long queues, logins, prices jumping at checkout. That's why Game Time gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. So, if you want to go to any of these college football playoff games or any of these bowl games, if your team is not one of the 8 remaining in the college football playoff, Game Time is the place to go. I've used it several times for sporting events, for comedy shows, and the experience has been great. I've compared the tickets I've gotten on Game Time to other ticketing services, and do you want to guess which one was lower? Yeah, it was Game Time. Every single time. Process was great, never had an issue. Game Time is giving you everything you want from a ticketing service. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. So Bryce Underwood is the biggest name that everyone is watching at Michigan. I'd guess that he stays. When you bring in a guy like Kyle Whittingham, I think he'll be able to calm the waters a little bit, settle everybody down, explain his vision for the program, and get everybody to understand that he still knows how to coach, which we know that he does, and that he's going to come in and play a brand of football that matches what that roster is currently comprised to do. Now, transfer portal opens on January 2nd, so maybe the floodgates open and nobody knows enough about Kyle Whittingham or they don't have any experience with him. Maybe there's going to be a lot of guys that go in the portal. I'm sure there will be some. I don't suspect Bryce Underwood will be one, especially if Whittingham is able to lure Jason Beck away from Utah. Because if he does, when you look at what the Utes did offensively this year with Devin Dampier and the skill set that Bryce Underwood has, a lot of similarities, except for the part where Bryce Underwood is bigger. I don't know if he's necessarily faster, but he's at least as fast, I think, where he's bigger, got the same level of mobility, has a better arm, and just has way more upside as a passer than Dampier. So you bring in a proven OC that's going to want to run the football, that will utilize a quarterback's legs effectively, but won't have it be the focal point to where you get a guy hurt or dinged up over the course of the year, kind of like Haynes King down at Georgia Tech, who's an absolute warrior. I want to throw this out there again, by the way, because nothing's evolved on this front. Jackson Arnold to Georgia Tech makes so much sense. That would be my number one top transfer portal fit for a quarterback that hasn't reached his full potential this offseason. Just throwing it out there. Anyway, bringing this back to the Michigan situation. If I'm Bryce Underwood, I'd stay at Michigan. Now, obviously, I don't know what's going on inside the kid's head. I don't know what his family thinks. I don't know what Kyle Whittingham's pitch is going to be. Maybe you wait and see what the offensive coordinator hire is going to be. All right. I think that's totally fair. I think that's a completely reasonable thing to do, that you'd want to have a conversation, understand what the system's going to be, how it'll further your development, and what his long-term goals are, which I'm sure include being selected in the NFL draft. Let's say it's not Jason Beck. Is there a coordinator that could come in and, so to speak, blow the Bryce Underwood interview? Is there what? This is a guy who wants to be at Michigan, who's being paid very well to be the quarterback for the Wolverines, regardless of who the head coach is. Is there a circumstance where he would leave? I think there is. Here's what I do know. I mean, this is me guessing, but I am so unbelievably solid in this. A lot of times, as they did with their previous change, a quarterback and an OC like sticking together. And you would not, and I think you would be foolish too, as good of a player as he is, as we saw him roll through most of the Big 12 this year, you would be foolish to bring Devin Dampier with you from Utah to force out Bryce Underwood. I don't think there is any world where Kyle Whittingham or Jason Beck or anyone in their right mind would make that call. The only way that Devin Dampier is Utah's starting quarterback in 2026 is if Bryce Underwood decides, following Jason Beck's hire, this is no longer the right place for me. I don't want to play for Coach Whittingham. I'm going in the portal, and he picks up the phone and he calls Lane Kiffin and says, hey, I used to be committed to this school. Do you want to have me as your quarterback? Which the answer would probably be yes, even though LSU is going after other guys like Sam Leavitt, for instance. So I think that's the only way, is if Bryce decides this isn't for me anymore, I need a fresh start, I got to get away from everything that happened here. Maybe that's where his head is at. I don't get the sense, after watching the 5-star documentary on Paramount Plus and hearing him talk about how much he really wanted to be the Michigan Wolverines quarterback, and now that he is, if anything were to drive him away, I suppose it'd be something like this. I don't think that hiring someone the caliber of Kyle Whittingham leads you to say, I can't do this anymore. This place is too much of a mess. Like, Kyle Whittingham's a pro. Even if he doesn't know the guy, you can get to know him. And a lot of guys like him. They're just, I don't know that I've ever heard a legitimate bad word said about Kyle Whittingham. And on the record, off the record, I've heard a lot of people talk about this guy. Incredibly liked and well-respected. Proven head coach. Has won games for a long time at a place where the resources that he has, or that he has had, have never been as strong, especially compared to his peers, as he now has in Michigan. So I think Kyle Whittingham's going to work. I'd want to stay there if I were Bryce Underwood. I don't think you would choose him, or I don't think you would choose Devin Dampier over him. Even though you have that relationship, even though you have that familiarity. As disrespectful as this sounds, if I'm Jason Beck and I'm going to be the Michigan offense coordinator, Devin Dampier is a fallback option, not a primary option, because you have got one of the best quarterbacks potentially from a ceiling, from a tools standpoint, in all of college football. So I think Dampier probably sticks with Utah. He's got another year of eligibility. I think he'll do very well. Have him right back in the college football playoff, Big 12 championship discussion next year. Michigan next season, they got to have a good offseason. This is as good of a start as you could possibly ask for, given the circumstances. Go get a couple of receivers. Make sure you're good enough up front. Get healthy at running back. But first, of course, you got to actually, hire a coaching staff. So there's that. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.